the biggest lesson I've learned from that day to this is you're still in control. All you have to do is get in the driver's seat.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Community is a powerful tool in our journeys. Whether we share experiences, offer support, or just be present, the sense of belonging that comes from community is invaluable. Which brings me to today's guest, Marine Corps veteran and Irreverent Warriors Vice President and Chief Operations Officer, Nate McDonald. Nate has witnessed the devastating effects of military service through the loss of comrades both on and off the battlefield and the ongoing psychological battles that veterans struggle with. Since transitioning from active duty, Nate has remained persistent about making positive differences in the lives of those facing challenges. And he recognizes that one significant factor contributing to mental health struggles is isolation. So Nate, thank you so much for joining me here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, as our listeners put on their Silkies and begin tracking their walk in their Strava app, I'd love to hear, first and foremost, why you decided to join the Marine Corps.
It's a good question. It's kind of a funny story. So it all started with a desire to join the military. One of the most influential people in my early days was my grandfather, and he was a half-track commander in World War II. And it was crazy because every time he talked about his service, he would just kind of glow with this pride and achievement. But he never told war stories. Like he never really told me about what happened overseas or anything like that. Didn't really even need that. Like he taught me how to hunt and fish, shoot, and just that sense that he had of that sense of pride in having served his country and being part of that. I always wanted that. Like I just wanted to try it, and ended up going to college. Was a dive instructor, a dive cop for a while. Got a couple of degrees, and then I was like, all right, well, it's now or never. So I moved back to Wisconsin temporarily, and while I was finishing up a degree program, and we had a little town next door called Baraboo, Wisconsin. And we drove 30 minutes over to Baraboo. It was the closest recruiter station. And they had them in like a strip mall. So there's like Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, you name it, all the way down the line. And I was like, I'm going to go in with an open mind. I'm going to go to every recruiter. And considering I'd already had some education under my belt and was physically fit, I had a pretty good reception at all the different recruiting depots. And yeah, man, absolutely. This is amazing. You should join us. This is all the cool stuff we did. And then I got to the Marine Corps recruiter's office. And this is no crap. The reason I initially joined, I got to the Marine Corps recruiter's office and I walked in and I was like, wow, this place is sharp. And there's this guy sitting in his chucks behind the desk, his service Charlies. And he's just sitting there looking at the doorway. And I was like, hey, man, how's it going? He's like, do you want to join the Marine Corps? I was like, I don't know, dude. That's why I'm here. Like, I want to talk to everybody and then see. And he's like, well, as soon as you figure that out, you come on back. And that was the attitude that he had in the initial interaction. And I was like, wow. So we ended up scheduling a meeting and I went back to him and he was like, hey, man, I'm just letting you know, like, you're going to have an easier go of it with most of these other services. So unless there's some sort of affinity for the Marine Corps and their culture, unless you really want to be a Marine, don't be a Marine. Like, go somewhere else. And he had the perfect sales pitch, man. I was in head over shoulders. I was ready to do some stuff.
Just esprit de corps from the very beginning?
It was some of that. And then I actually started looking into things. I always wanted to get into tactical intelligence, which is where I ended up being. And the Marine Corps had a really good history with that sort of MOS. So I was like, absolutely.
That's really awesome. I love the nonchalantness when you first approach him. He wasn't trying to pitch you on anything. He was just like, you're going to want to join us. I don't need you.
He knew his audience, man, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, during your time in service, were there any key moments in the Marine Corps that you felt really shaped who you became after the service?
There's probably a lot of them. I'm gonna be honest from the get-go. I have too many head dents to remember a whole lot of detail. But there's this common idea that Marine Corps veterans kind of have this chip on their shoulder, like, we've been picked on, but we're the best. And honestly, when I was in, that was kind of part of it. It was that sense of belonging. I've now interacted with every service, both, while I was still in active duty and in the veteran community. And everybody's got this specific brotherhood or camaraderie that they feel with their service. And as much as we all have that throughout the veteran community, it's a little different, Marine to Marine or, soldier to soldier. I mean, we can give each other crap all day long, but somebody else comes into the room and starts dogging on the Marine Corps, we're going to have some words to say. So I think it was that sense of pride and belonging that was really cool, that kind of stuck with me through those early years as I was getting trained up and ready to go. And then after that, I think one of the biggest things that shaped me was just the consistent discipline that I had. It was just different. In the Marine Corps, it wasn't just the rules and the regulations. There was also expectations. You didn't want to let your superiors down. You didn't want to let your comrades down. And together, we all held each other accountable, and we're better because of it. Obviously, we all made our share of mistakes. But I think that's one of the things that's kind of shaped who I became, and just kind of I've kind of stayed on that path. Discipline has served me well over the years, and it's definitely been a huge part in me finding improved wellness overall.
Wow. So can you talk a little bit more about like this sense of discipline that's really carried on post-service? Because I know when a lot of people do get out, things that they were forced to do in the Marine Corps, like shave or PT in the morning or show up to the office, right? These are all things that start to drop off when we don't have that external motivator of a supervisor kind of making sure that we're showing up everywhere where we're supposed to be and getting the stuff done. So how did that discipline carry over into your life post-service?
Absolutely. Well, the environment changed. The responsibility really didn't for me. So when I transitioned into the veteran community as a civilian, it wasn't just the fact that I didn't have Sergeant What's-His-Face as my comrade, that we could hold each other accountable. It wasn't just that it was, the commandant of the Marine Corps put out this guidance and we better follow it. It was so much more than that. It's your responsibility to your environment. When I was in the Marine Corps was my environment. The guy to my left and right, gal to my left and right, it was my family, my job, my mission, my purpose. Let's go. And when I transitioned out, that was still my responsibility. My environment changed, but now I was responsible to my family and my fellow veterans. And when I was in the workplace, I was responsible for my impacts in my atmosphere. So yeah, I think that's how it kind of just transitioned with me. I just realized my environment was changing and the players in my world were changing. My responsibility stayed the same.
That's really awesome. What led you to get out of the Marine Corps anyways?
That's another tricky question. If you had asked me, even halfway through my last enlistment, if you'd asked me, yo, Nate, you going to stay in? I'd have been like, no, dude, I'm getting out. I'm going to go be a contractor, make that good money. Right. And then I took my last deployment from, I want to say it was like, once again, memory. It was like May, I think April or May when I deployed to Afghanistan, my last time as a Marine. And I came back in September, maybe October. All of my pumps when I was in, I had kind of an unconventional career. They were pretty short. That was one of my longest trips overseas. And during that trip, I got banged up a little bit more, I should say. I'd always been in this, process where, like, when you're in the military and you're active, you're doing a lot of stuff, you're constantly getting bumps and bruises and this and that. Like you're going to get hit, you're going to sprain your ankle, whatever thing. Right. And every time I took a piece of shrapnel or, I banged my head on something or my back just went out or my left knee's causing me issues. It was always just part of the process. It wasn't like, here's an obstacle. It was like, all right, cool. another challenge. So it was always, the process was you get dinged up, you come back or start working on it immediately, get fixed up, get serviceable, and you're right back in the mission. And that last deployment, I got back, went through my processing, my post-deployment processing, and they were like, dude, you're not going to go tactical anymore. Turns out I had a pretty significant head injury toward the end of that deployment, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That's when I started getting more active seizure disorder. Migraines started setting in. So it wasn't even just that I was a liability to myself. I was a liability to the other people in my operations, like no matter what I did. So I quickly went from I'm probably going to get out, I'm going to go be a contractor, to, hey man, that's not even an option. You have to get out. And suddenly my pride was hurt. That was all ego. I was like, no, dude, this is just another one. I'm going to fix myself up, get back in the fight. I'll be ready to go. Let's look at that paperwork for the next enlistment. And that never happened. So it was either stay in and go strategic with the rest of my career, or get out. Now, the smart option that I didn't even have on the table would have been stay in, get your physical and mental health work done, medically separate or medically retire if that's the case, and then move forward. I didn't even have that as an option. In my mind, it was, you guys either use me for what I want to do, or I'm out. And so I bounced. My ETS was like 2-3 months after my enlistment, and I just got out and went into contracting. So that's kind of how that journey went down.
Wow, that doesn't leave like any time for a transition. And like when you were telling the story, especially about what your options were, I heard the replay of the end of my career as well. Third tour, decided to be honest on the questionnaires, and it started that cycle of medical professionals saying, hey, your career is going to change significantly, and start making other plans, because I'm not signing the paperwork for you to go back over to Iraq or Afghanistan. And that's devastating to our egos. Fortunately for me, I was on a limited duty board, so I got a lengthy transition out of the service and mental health while I was on my way out. But sounds like yours was very rapid. So how do you feel like you kind of prepared for that transition? And did you link up with any VA support during that time too?
Yeah. Honestly, the quick turn was my fault. It really was. I got plenty of good counsel. I really did, from, both peers and people on the civilian veteran side of the house. And I just didn't listen. I should have gone through all those processes, and like I kind of inferred earlier, I really had to get to the stage where I was acknowledging my deficiencies, where I was acknowledging the new situation. Like, the situation changed consistently throughout my military career. And I still considered myself to be the same person, capable of the same stuff. And I was in this mindset that if I didn't acknowledge all of these issues, that they would just go away. And that might work situationally, but it's a terrible general rule. So, I mean, when it comes to seeking support on that transition, I didn't do it. My entire headspace was, I am going to be operational as well. Again, as soon as I get my seizures under control and the rest of my body heals up, I'm right back in the fight. And in my mind, me being open about my feelings, my mental health, my physical health, my symptoms, both my neurology and the other issues I had going on with my body, that was going to disqualify me from doing what I felt most passionate about doing at the time. So I did. I really got into it. And for the most part, over the next 6 months, I I can't even really say I healed up, but I put enough Band-Aids on things that I wasn't a risk to others, and I got right back into operational contracting. I'm not going to name any names, but I think I was with 3 different contractors over the next 1.5 to 2 years. Got to see a lot of different places and do some really cool stuff, but I never had the same feeling that I had when I was in the military, in those operational contracting slots. So yeah, long answer long. I should have looked out for those resources. Like any command, my command had the entire checklist. Yeah, turn in your gear, go to TAPS, like do all this stuff. And I did the stuff that was required, but I went through the motions. My head wasn't in it. My heart wasn't in it. And I think there's some direct correlations to my message to other veterans now. I learned the hard way, but if you don't acknowledge what's going on, you're never going to find relief. So yeah, I didn't pay attention in TAPS because that's not where my head was. I wasn't listening to any of these transition resources or really even connecting with veteran support services or veterans because my headspace was, I still want to be operational right now. Get me in the fight.
That is an incredibly enlightened answer and like self-awareness. And a guy like Jocko Willink would be incredibly proud of the things that you just said, because you said like, my transition didn't go the way that it should have been. My on the surface, my medical condition forced me out of the military is what a lot of people would say. But what you're saying is I had every option to have a better transition and a better experience. But because my pride and my ego were so wrapped up in what I was doing, in the purpose that I was living, that I ignored them and I turned away from them. But now, instead of blaming leadership or blaming the systems that are in place to help people make these transitions, how did you get to that point, and how do you help other veterans get to that point as well?
Yeah, the second part of that question is the tougher answer of the two. I'm one of those folks that I've always been really, really driven to learn from my mistakes, whether they were intentional or unintentional. That's not the point. We all struggle with ego. It's a part of human existence. I realized early on that my ego got in my way more often than not. And I think as much as those lessons toward the end of my career weren't something I ever want to re-encounter. I mean, I was at an all-time high going into that last deployment. I was fit as a fiddle. I was knocking things out of the park. I was getting it. And going from all-time high to all-time low in about an 8-month period, it's the hardest stretch of my whole life. And a lot of it was self-inflicted. Some of it wasn't. Some of it was circumstances. But I put myself there. I knew the risk, and it was, all right, cool. I accepted that risk. Things happened. What's the next step? So, I mean, there is no easy answer to how I learned those lessons. I learned them the hard way, man. I really did. And I've had a lot of really cool people in my sphere of influence that have poked me in the right direction here and there and given me help and advice. It's amazing how much you can learn when you just open up your perspective just a little bit. We have a tendency to frame things and almost everything through a very specific position. And that position is often influenced by our current life motivations. What are we trying to accomplish? What is our purpose? Well, unfortunately, a lot of those negative emotions come into play as well. And you're like, where are my insecurities? Where are my where are my struggles? And a lot of those things also frame whatever you're going through in a very specific way. I've just learned over the years to drag myself out of my own preconceived notions, out of my own worldview or situational view that I've developed, and try to look at it from other perspectives.
That's awesome. And you've talked about this several times, purpose. Even when you went contracting, you said like you were serving the same job, but you didn't have that same sense of purpose that you had when you were active duty. And a lot of veterans and a lot of literature is written about veterans losing a sense of purpose after joining the military, which leads to future struggles. How did you go about eventually finding a purpose that suited who you were or who you are?
It was trial and error and a lot of evolution. I don't know that finding your purpose is something that's an easy road to travel. And honestly, my purpose, or the different things that make up my purpose, have changed constantly. At the end of the day, one of the things that I grew up trying to accomplish was trying to positively impact the world around me, wherever that happened to be. So once it was in the military and veteran space, that's kind of where the core of what I wanted to accomplish and the area of influence I wanted to have, like that's where it was anchored. But the boat is still all over the place above the water. That's just keeping me locked in, or has kept me locked in there. I mean, you can talk to anybody about their purpose and they're going to talk about, what they're passionate about. What is their moral foundation? What is the impact they want to make? And what is the reason behind the impact that they want to make? And those are all incredibly complex things to figure out. I know one of the things that I've run into with a lot of my comrades that have struggled with identifying what their sense of purpose is they almost feel like they need to cut off one to start another, or they need to identify exactly what that purpose is and put it in words and then accomplish that specific thing. We don't know, man. Like this is a complex experience. Entering the world as a human and leaving it the same, like that's complicated. Not leaving it the same as it was, but leaving it as a human. I would hope. That's a complex thing to figure out. You don't need to know everything. You just need a piece. And that's kind of the lesson I learned is, what is one thing that I want to do? Who do I want to impact? What that's grown into is I want to be a part of improving the veteran condition. However I can. Right now, that's through Irreverent Warriors. Like that's where I can make my impact. It's a very unique opportunity. I can't say that, that's always going to be my specific focus. But yeah, coming from the military space, I know a lot of my comrades did that. They were like, all right, so my purpose has been, let's say that they were admin. My purpose was I needed to make sure inventories were straight and report those up the chain, and I'm responsible for any failures. That is my whole purpose. I don't know if you guys watch Rick and Morty, but there's this one episode where he creates this little robot and he's like, what is my purpose? And he's like, you pass butter. And the robot's like, oh no. Like that's what we get in our headspace as veterans. We're like, what is your purpose? Well, I maintain the weapon system, and then I go and deploy it downrange at the effect of my platoon commander's bidding. And cool, man, that's not really your purpose. Like, what is it? Drill down into it. It's not your responsibility. It's not your job. It's not your vocation. Like, why are you there? And I don't think a lot of people know how to answer that. So you come in with, a lot of people come out of the military, and if they were to put anything into sense of purpose, it would be like, well, I want to serve my country. I want to protect our freedoms. I want to have the backs of all these people in this country that are my friends and relatives and family. Like, it's all protection. It's that. Now you try to take that and you transition it to a job where you're not actually fighting per se. You're not deploying weapon systems downrange. You're not necessarily conducting inventories for the admin shop. But the root purpose, what you're striving to accomplish, protecting the people you care about, protecting the values that you hold dear, those transition with you, or they can transition with you. So, I mean, I think it's more about redefining what sense of purpose is for a lot of people than it is just a quick answer. What's your purpose in that? Okay, now what's your purpose? Now what's your purpose? Like a lot of your purpose elements are still probably the same, dude. You've just got to figure out how to transition those into something that is now in your sphere of influence.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I know a lot of people never even ask is what am I here for? What is my purpose? I know for myself, like I joined the military at 18 years old. I just did stuff because that's what people suggest that I do. I never necessarily considered, like, I was given a purpose in the military, and when I was getting out, like it was okay, now how do I make money, and how do I get a job, and how do I do all of these other things? And when I was at certain jobs, fulfilling those roles didn't fill me the same way that the military service would. But I'll be honest, like for a lot of people that experienced combat, you're never going to have that again, because you're not going to go to combat again. For a lot of people that were deployed on ships, like, guess what? You're probably not going to be put on a ship with 200 to 5,000 of your closest friends and go sail around the world again. Like, that's just, that job is no longer there, but your community is right where you make it. And one of the things that I love about Irreverent Warriors that you found yourself in as the Vice President and Chief Operations Officer is you guys focus on connecting people to a community so that they can build their own. And, the company's been around, or the nonprofit's been around since 2015 doing this mission, and it's really blown up in the last couple of years. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what Irreverent Warriors is and what you guys are about?
Yeah. So I'll share it in, I'll just kind of explain my experience coming to understand what Irreverent Warriors was all about and see if that resonates with anybody. But when I transitioned into the civilian side, I realized that, sure, I wasn't active duty. I wasn't wearing the uniform anymore, but I actually had more comrades now, like more peers, people that had served and now are no longer serving, at least as active duty military service members. Like, I had more people now in my actual community than I had when I was active duty. And I started to realize through my own struggles that the veteran condition was a challenging thing. When I was in the service, I lost dozens of buddies to their own mental health. One of them being my cousin. I went to basic training with the guy. We were fairly close while he was in the service. He transitioned out, and I couldn't get a word out of him. I couldn't connect with him. And he committed suicide a few years ago. And it was all of those situations that compounded. And I was like, all right, well, who's taking care of these guys? So I started getting into nonprofit work. I started trying to find opportunities to impact veterans. Still my comrades on a different side of the situation, still my comrades. And at first that started with me just having open conversations with people that I saw were struggling, or taking classes on peer support and crisis response. Just making sure that I was the most prepared I could be to impact my new mission, which was in part supporting my comrades on the flip side of service. And that kind of led me into networking with a lot of other veteran organizations. And you'll not hear me talk poorly of another VSO. It doesn't matter if I agree or I don't agree. If they're taking care of our folks and they're doing it for the right reasons, I'm going to support that. What resonates with me won't necessarily resonate with you. That was my experience. I came out and I worked with one, and then I worked with another, and then I helped raise support over here, and then I tried to raise awareness with this nonprofit, and nothing truly resonated with me. And for me, that was one of my frustrations over the first 5 years of me transitioning out of the Marine Corps is I couldn't find my home. I had friends that connected with Team RWB, Red, White, Blue, or one of the local VSOs, the VFW, the American Legion, were very happy there. They found their connectivity. They found the pieces of support that they needed. And for me, a lot of those organizations I worked with, they weren't it for me. Like they didn't resonate the way that I wanted them to. So once again, knowing your comrades or knowing my comrades, a lot of the guys that I was in with, a lot of the guys that had a similar experience to me were telling me the same things. So now I was on a full-blown search. One of my buddies in Fayetteville, North Carolina, I was up there at JSOC as a contractor, and he's like, hey, man, we've been trying to do a Silkies hike in Fayetteville, and there's no reason why it shouldn't work. It's a huge military base. We got tons of people around. I need to be connected. Well, I just connected and networked with so many VSOs and veterans in the area that it worked. The community came together, and no crap. All these different pieces. We had VSOs there. We had the VA. We had government liaisons. It was amazing. But the community came together and put this event on, and I was able to help facilitate that. Still, in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is a cool event. We're going to show up on a Saturday, ruck around town, hang out. It's going to be great. I was all down for it. And then I did the pre-mission brief, and we're hitting the streets, and I'm about a mile into this event, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen. Like, this was my demographic of veteran. These were people that had served in places that I'd served, or in an era that I'd served in. They were having conversations that resonated with me, and they were having conversations with each other. And that's something that I hadn't really experienced. Everybody loves to talk. They don't necessarily like to share their insecurities and their pains, their traumas. And yet so often that's what they need to find an opportunity to share. So it's all about finding an environment where they're comfortable with that. And somehow these 450 odd veterans in silkies and rucks, waving dumb flags, dressed to the nines, just being silly, being irreverent. That was enough for them to let their guard down, to realize that the entire element, and I mean everybody, was military or veteran. You don't have to look over your shoulder and go, yo, man, you okay with what I'm saying? Like, you could just open up. You could be real. Now, granted, that's also something we have to hold in check at some of these events. It's like, oh, don't be that real, man. Like, let's reel it in a little bit, maybe. But I mean, you always got to kind of balance it with responsibility. But these people in general were doing that. They were there for the right reason. And the mission just was so impactful to me as the coordinator at that first event that I wanted to be a bigger part.
That's awesome. You know, in these Silky hikes, which have become kind of the key event that Irreverent Warriors is now known for, and you guys dabble in just about everything. Like you said, you guys support other veteran service organizations. You invite them out to your events. You help with the coordination. But a lot of people get really excited about these Silkies events that happen. I think I saw it's happening all over the globe, like not just in country, but in different parts of the world as well, where there are bases. You have organizers there. I have two questions. First, are Silkies required? Because sometimes I'm a little bit self-conscious putting those things on. And more importantly, what's the impact that you've seen in the veteran community as a whole with these Silkies hikes?
So at first, yes, you have to wear. No, you don't. You don't have to wear Silkies. Honestly, guys, we have very specific standards, and talking to military and veterans, you have to be specific with your direction, or they are going to push those boundaries as far as they can. So we spell out in our pre-hike brief and all our material, these are the areas that need to be covered. And people generally do that. As long as you are modest, we honestly don't care what you wear. Like, you can wear jeans and a t-shirt. You can go out and hike in athleisure wear if you want. More than likely, the Silkies bug is going to get you, though. And if there's one thing that's going to help you with this insecurity, it's looking at all the rest of us broken veterans out there on the street not caring. Just, you know what? We're all wearing Silkies now, bud. I would say that most people give them a try at one point or another, but it's definitely not a requirement. And the same goes with the athletic portion of it. All of our Silkies hikes are between 8 and 10 miles, about on average. We stop like 4 or 5 times along the way. We go like 3 miles an hour. That's mandated. It's a very achievable event for anyone. So if you're like, I'm not into rucking, I'm not in my best physical condition, come out to a hike. You'll see about, half of the element that also is not in the best physical condition. The second part of that, man, the impact from the organization, you kind of stated it at the beginning of the show that it's the community. The hikes are a construct, and that's kind of what I described. It's a way to connect with a certain demographic of veteran that isn't necessarily going to feel comfortable with us sending out a mass community email saying, hey guys, we've all got problems. What we would like is to assemble in mass and talk about our problems. So we're going to have a mental health day where that's all we do. This is what people have heard for decades, that they've been in the service or out of the service. Like, that is the messaging. We didn't do that. We're like, hey guys, the magic is y'all. All we're trying to do is put you in the same spot. So come out and join us for this great event, free food, have a great time. And all we did is tee up the ball. Now, all of these veterans that are searching for community or searching for their next best friend, like, that really happens. People that met at that first hike I helped coordinate are still fast friends to this day. And that's the point. That construct that we're doing to pull a certain demographic or several different demographics of veterans out of isolation and get them connected, that's just the introduction. The Silkies hikes, all of our events, I don't care if it's a barbecue, a river float, that is the introduction to the network, to a network of resources, of support services, accountability, peer support between veterans. And that's the whole point. So I would say the impact overall that I've been able to see is just a more connected and probably honest veteran community around our events and throughout our communities. People being willing to throw their ego aside and have a hard, challenging conversation. People willing to be vulnerable. So, I mean, it's been a great thing to be a part of.
I absolutely love that, Nate. I mean, connection is what's going to save lives. And unfortunately, there is still the ongoing struggle with the tragic suicide rates among the veteran community, first responders, and our service members. What message of hope do you want to bring to somebody that's currently struggling?
Well, my message of hope is also potentially going to come across as a little bit of a challenge, because in my experience, you need a little bit of both. One of the biggest obstacles to veterans in finding support or finding their own wellness is their inability to quit playing the victim and get in the driver's seat. And I know I possibly just stepped on a bunch of y'all's toes, and I'm sorry for that, guys, but it's the truth. And I've walked in those shoes. I've been in a place where I was like, all right, well, that option isn't on the table and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, that's broken. Okay, well, now my memory sucks. All right, now I have seizures. That's going to affect the rest of my life. Now I'm alone. I'm going through a divorce. Now my kid's not even there with me. I went through a rough road during my separation and transition and learned a lot through that process. The biggest lesson I've learned from that day to this is you're still in control. All you have to do is get in the driver's seat. The resources exist. The network exists. I promise you, you're loved. You are respected by someone. And if you don't have them in the world around you, you're in the wrong spot. Or maybe you're not getting out there and checking it out. That is the message of hope, though. It's a challenge as well. Like, yo, bro, quit being a victim. The reason why your back hurts so badly is because you're overweight and you're sitting on your couch playing video games all day and numbing your pain and anxieties with substances. That's probably one of the reasons why your back hurts. Or you can blame it on all the rucking you did in the sandbox. That happened. That's in the past. You can't control that. You can control how you adapt and overcome those issues and move forward with your life. And that, for me, that was all the hope that I needed. I was in the darkest spot of my entire life. Couldn't even tell you the date. That's how irrelevant it is to me at this stage. But it was after I transitioned out, went through a divorce almost immediately. I thought the issues in my marriage were due to the fact that I was deployed all the time or military stress. And I'm not going to say those pieces didn't play a part, but there was more. There was a lot more involved. And those issues weren't being addressed. And so I went through that, went through, hey, how much time am I going to get my daughter every year? Girl was my world. Had transitioned from operational contracting for these random contractors to working as a government contractor. That was a good transition, but now my network didn't exist. And I sat out behind my big old house in North Carolina, 25 acres. It's quiet, just listening to birds and bugs. And I was sad. I was alone. And I wasn't doing anything about it. But at the time, none of that mattered. I was consumed. And everything I was consumed with was everything that had happened to me. Past tense. Everything that had taken me from where I was to this deepest, darkest moment on my back deck. And the only thing that kept me alive in that moment was, well, I have a daughter. Like, she needs her dad. Like, what are you gonna off yourself? Like, I didn't get to the point where I was sticking a barrel in my mouth. Never got that far. Mentally, over and over and over. And this was probably the most significant of those situations. And I realized that I had two choices. It was either jump in the driver's seat and find a way forward, or perish. I could live out the rest of my life in meaningless existence, in pain and suffering, anxiety and sorrow. Like, sure, dude, what kind of life is that? So yeah, it was deepest, darkest moment of my life. And it was also a huge turning point in my life. And I'm going to say that didn't happen until about 4 years after I got out. Prior to that, I just tried to stay as busy as possible and not show any weakness. And that didn't work out for me. It didn't work out so well.
Rarely does it ever. And it sounds like Irreverent Warriors was that VSO that you needed to become a part of, because that's, where you found the community, and that community is a thing that helps teach us and helps us grow. And for our 1 Mile 1 Veteran listeners out there that are yet to be a part of a walking group, if you're looking for something, I would love to refer you to Irreverent Warriors. And so, Nate, how can people stay in contact with you and connect with Irreverent Warriors in their area?
Absolutely. We have communities, like you mentioned, now across the world. We have one in just about every state, and there's so much more opportunity out there. Every one of those communities is led by a volunteer, much like myself, that just wants to make a positive impact in the world around them. And that includes their comrades. They take it as a personal responsibility. So they raise their hand, they put in all the time and the effort to network and pull this community together and maintain it. And I can't say enough about these amazing volunteers, guys. If you're one of them, you want to start a community in an area near you, it will matter. Sometimes they take a while to grow, but it's all about your investment in others. You mentioned earlier, like, how do you help other people? And for me, one of my mantras in life is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. One of the best ways you can demonstrate investment in someone is being around them, spending time with them. That's an opportunity here. So whether we have an IW community in your area or you could use one, irreverentwarriors.com is the place to go. We have a communities page there. We have an events page. Check it out, man. It might not be for you. You might not enjoy it. That's all right. It's worth checking out.
That's awesome. Well, Nate, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time here on the 1 Mile 1 Veteran podcast.
Appreciate you having me, guys.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, remember, you can catch the 1 Mile 1 Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio, available on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.